Hello everyone, today I'm looking at Bioshock, the original. This was really released in around 2006 or 7, I think, and this was a game that took the game industry by storm. I was really confused as to what this game's relationship was with the System Shock series, and apparently there are two separate studios, but a handful of people came from System Shock and ended up making Bioshock, but not the whole team, so obviously there are a lot of things different about it. Bioshock takes a more a different approach where it's more contemporary in its political outlook, essentially, where it begins by comparing a bunch of different political systems from Washington to Moscow, communism, capitalism, and the church, and saying, well, I chose neither of these, I chose Rapture. And essentially you end up in this underwater city, and you end up basically being confronted with this kind of dystopian utopia that has fallen apart within its own self. And so very much like System Shock, this is a story about hubris and the struggle of man, and how things fall apart and that kind of stuff. Overall, there's things I like about Bioshock. I like its story. I like its setting. I like the twist at the end, or at the middle rather, is actually a very, very well done twist, because they hint at little, I guess, like very little details strewn throughout the entire story that kind of builds up a believable reason why things are as they are, and you kind of reveal this big moment where, like, oh, okay, wow, I get it. It's I don't know, I thought it was very smartly done, and the end of the game too is whatever. On that point though, there are some things about this game I definitely don't like in general. Just kind of the setting, the technology, the sound effects, everything. It's all based on this 1920s-esque kind of vibe, but everything's kind of like weird and crazy and just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of puts a bad taste in my mouth. I just don't like the atmosphere, honestly, of Bioshock. Sometimes it's fine, but sometimes it just has this old hokey feel to it, and just, it feels very rough around the edges. Like, I don't know, in any other universe, if this game was totally ignored and not like reviewed and critically acclaimed, and you just picked it up without knowing that it was a very popular game, it would be a very kind of okay experience. But it got the reception that it got, and because of that, it has a whole series of sequels and other kinds of games in this franchise. So the basic gameplay of Bioshock, you basically get a pistol, submachine gun, and a crossbow, bolts, and other kinds of weapons. And similar to System Shock, each weapon has multiple ammo, actually, about maybe at least 3 types of ammo. And you can like switch between them depending on the enemies that you're facing, which I found more annoying in this game, because with 3 types of ammo, you don't really have 3 types of enemies. You just have like the standard enemies, and you're just rotating between the certain ammo that you just need at the time, or that you're running low on, rather. And again, I just don't like how everything's kind of hokey dokey, and it feels all, I don't know how to describe it. It just feels very kind of hokey is the word I would say. Kind of maybe a little bit campy in a way. Just how all of the people are just crazy and deranged, and I just don't like the art direction of a lot of the things, how it's this like old-timey, old-schooly thing, and then it's all just very weird and just generally just, I don't know, bizarre and off-putting and weird, which is kind of the point, but it doesn't feel like this is an interesting place to be, kind of. And just the interface too, and the sound effects all sound very kind of stock effects. I don't know, there's just some things about this game, and some of the powers just kind of like, okay, that's cool, but I never use that. The telekinesis thing, it's like, yeah, I'll get that to like, get that one item that one time, but for the most part, I'm not going to really go into that. Again, though, the gameplay is solid, and it has this whole kind of aesthetic around different, technologies and genetics. And so the whole purpose and idea behind Bioshock is that, this wealthy guy, by some means, built this giant underwater city that was free from governments and taxes and everything. It's supposed to be this utopia, and it basically collapses, and it's your job to kind of, pick up the pieces and find out what happened and also fix everything. And of course, you get communicated in through different kinds of comm links and different kinds of crazy characters and bosses that you end up having to fight, and upgrading your guns and weapons and your genes. And so the big kind of reoccurring boss in the game, as you know, is the little sisters and I actually forget what they're called. Are they just called Big Brothers? Or Mr. Drill or something? Big Daddies. I'm sorry. They're called Big Daddies. And they're these giant guys with these giant, suits and this giant drill. And, in the trailers, it kind of shows them being all, like somewhere under the sea, by that song. And it shows this kind of dystopian world. And those guys were very iconic. And in their suit of armor, and really kind of sold the series, I would say. It was the iconic enemy that really made this game. And because it was kind of taken as like this really super mature kind of take, they made sure that they had, the drill sticking out the guy's chest. And it was like, this big scene, this big moment of, like realistic violence and whatever. And so the basic premise is that these girls are basically have been, they did basically genetic experiments trying to push genetics to the peak of its possibility to see what kind of creatures or like the superhuman might can create. Something that was a very popular idea in the 20s with the, theory of evolution being, brought forth, and the idea that man could naturally force himself to evolve. And so that kind of idea kind of was brought to the forefront. And so the Big Daddies kind of act as these mini bosses essentially in the game. And so the little sisters, I'm not exactly sure how it's defined or described, because the problem is that with these games a lot of things maybe aren't very clear, but essentially with the Big Daddies, they're these superhuman guys who basically were experimented on, and they have built this connection with the little sisters, where they essentially take care of them. And the little sisters are these girls that have been transformed into this weird, immortality gone wrong kind of substance, where essentially they seem to not be able to die, but not be able to, lead normal lives essentially. And so a lot of the use or powers that you get are basically genetically based. So you come across these labs and also genetic based splicing experiments that you jab into your arm, and that allows you essentially to do a series of different augmentations to give you superpowers like lightning, fire, telekinesis. I also have to admit though, the one part of this gameplay I do really love is a hacking mini game. As stupid and as easy as it is, arranging all these pipes to make the water go through, I actually enjoyed that quite a lot, honestly. Again, there's the whole looting mechanic and whatnot, and getting the right materials to upgrade your weapons, and also your atom and your power to increase your overall abilities and your health and stuff like that. And so of course, every time you feed a little sister and a Big Daddy, you are confronted with the choice to essentially spare the girl or absorb her atomic genetic powers. And so if you choose to instead absorb her, then basically she'll become nothing, and she'll dissolve, and basically you'll get the power at the end that has the bad ending. But of course, if you save all little sisters, they give you a gift, and at the end of the game, they all become normal girls and all grow up to essentially lead normal lives, and they all thank you for it. So this game does have two different endings. There's Andrew Ryan, who's basically the creator of this place, who you think is the villain at the beginning, but then it turns out to be someone else. And then he has this giant kind of, again, this genetic-based, superhuman soldier fight with you. Again, very much in the style of the 20s. And, the whole thing just kind of comes together as giant climactic battle, which is all right. And of course, throughout the game, very much like System Shock, you have like these whole, areas filled with different, upgrades and wine bottles and food items you can use to, restore your health and all that stuff. And almost like Skyrim, there's just so much stuff in this game. And, the game does ask really interesting questions about, choice and freedom. Like, what does freedom really mean? Does it mean living in a free society? Does it mean doing what your government tells you or doing what you want, even though it goes against society? It asks some pretty decent questions for an action-based shooter. But yeah, and so that's similar to System Shock as well. It's almost philosophical in a way. And of course, you're going to be, managing your inventory, looting everything in sight. Obviously, fortunately, your loot amount is not really capped in this game, which is very thankful. And again, they're just weird, silly kind of characters. Like there's this one guy who is like an artist or something, and so he tries to make a theater show out of everything, and so people are demented and messed up. And there's a certain point where it just becomes a little bit, too much. It just becomes too ridiculous. And again, I just don't like, I don't know, the aesthetics of. I mean, I like 20s architecture. I just don't like the aesthetics of this kind of. It's more like the 30s, like everything's bright lights and goofy and over the top, and everything feels like a clown show. That's what I really don't like, and what I really, despise. Something that's really cool about the Big Daddies in this game, especially what I like about them, is that when you walk by them, like the screen shakes and like it trembles a little bit. Like you get the full weight of these guys in the game. You really feel how powerful they are, and how dangerous they are, and how they are such a huge feat to really take down. It feels really good to take down one of the Big Daddies. And yeah, there's just, Bioshock is, at the end of the day, it's just a vibe, this underwater city that's been cut off from everything else, this dystopian kind of area, that's Bioshock, baby. And no one has done something similar or better since. In fact, I can't think of any Bioshock clones, really, now that I think about it, which is kind of odd, maybe. I'm sure there's some out there, but they're just probably not very good at all. And of course, you'll pick up things like cryptic messages from people who did experiments and get a better understanding of the identity of, the society and also the people who live there and exactly what has happened to them. And so you're uncovering the story, the mystery, and finally putting an end to it through combat. But yeah, that's pretty much a Bioshock, the classic game that has spawned quite a couple sequels, but really not quite something as iconic as this. I thought Infinite was pretty good, but that's for another review. Anyway, guys, that's it. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.